I am Johnny Detroit. With me is Steve Fezzik. Right out the gate, yes, his hair is real. It's not fake. I've met him multiple times in person. What we're going to do is we're going to fly through as much stuff as possible. There is a ton of questions already in the system. So if you have a question, I would ask it as soon as possible to get on that list because there's no possible way we're going to get through them all. The first thing we're going to do is Fezzik came to me and there's a couple topics and tips that he wanted to share with everyone. So we're going to go right into that. And then if any questions come out of that, feel free to jump in. So the first thing we're going to do is talk contests. Clearly, Fezzik, unmatched with the success rate in Vegas contests. We know what he's done in the Hilton. If you're listening live and watching live, you'll see the picture of him holding that big check from the last Vegas Hilton Super Contest. I won in 2005, but I've never won anything 2 years in a row. So, Fezzik, first thing you want to talk about, betting in contests. The floor is yours.
Yeah, you want to run better than God. It's like a poker tournament. You got to win all your pocket queens against ace-king races. That certainly helps. But in all seriousness, one thing I would say, you see all these proxies. People are going to get a proxy to sign up for them, and they're going to put in the picks like a day before the deadline. I would say if you're playing a high-end contest, small end doesn't matter. I would not play in it unless you got a proxy they can put in your picks half an hour before the deadline. That's such a time advantage to have perfect information about quarterback injuries, weather, everything else before you submit. And I see that's the number one mistake I see in these contests, people putting in their picks even 48 hours before the deadline.
So shopping for the line, seeing on injuries, clearly with the whole thing on, like you said, as them being static lines. And I know at the Hilton around the corner and the whole $100,000 Fezzik challenge that we'll get to in a second. And then with the proxies, I've also had some friends, my friend Reno at Offshore Better, some friends of mine in Vegas who use, proxies because they are traveling a lot. Is I've heard so many horror stories of someone getting caught in traffic and they didn't get their plays in. So outside of the obvious, and let's just be honest, Fez, that's an obvious one, is wait till the last second, wait for line moves or injuries. What are some other tips that you can give people to handicap maybe differently, advice-wise, that you give them versus handicapping their normal bets when they're handicapping a contest?
I see this all the time. You don't just have your top – people say, I've got my top 5 picks and I'm going to use them in the contest. Well, no. Come up with your top 8 or 10 picks and make sure you don't get ripped off on the line. So if you love a favorite and there's -2.5s on the screen and there's some -3s on the screen, and it's like split 50-50, and they've got the contest at -3, don't put -3 in on your contest. Go ahead and just make a straight bet -2.5 because you have an implicit – if you're in contention, the only time this really matters is if you're in contention. You have an implicit bet on that team anyways on the contest. So why go there and lay 3 when you could have laid 2.5 if you've got other games that you like? So that would be, one piece of advice. Another thing, and this is not popular also, spend tons and tons of time on your picks and on your contests when you're close to the money or in the money. If you're at 500 after 5 weeks, I know you paid $1,500 to play in this contest, but your implied equity is only a couple $100. It's really not worth hardly anything anymore. Don't knock yourself out all week to put in your picks and everything when you just don't have much equity in it. It'd be like you're in a poker tournament and you almost have no chips left. Yeah, don't just give up, but you don't have to pull your hair out making that your priority for the week.
Real quick question. This is something I've always wanted to know when you're handicapping contests. And I ran into this back in, I think it was 2005 when we won. Do you ever take into account what you may think, say when you're getting to the nitty-gritty late in the contest, if you feel, or through the grapevine, a certain play might be a popular play? Is there any, contrarian thinking that goes into these contest picks? You just do what you got to do and go with God, my son.
No, you when you're out of the money, you must do things to catch up. So the extreme example is week 17, the line steams from -7 to -10 on a game, and you're in 31st place. You cannot play that game because you're not going to catch up. Everyone who's in the money is going to play that team -7. You actually, if you're far enough behind, you probably have to put +7 on your card and just hope that you win your little mini pleaser on that game. And in fact, when I won in 2008, people all the time say, oh, he just plays all the stale lines, and that's all he does. Well, everybody plays all the stale lines. That's what a lot of people do. I started out 14-1 that year. I was in first place for half a year. I regressed. I hit 500 for the next 6 weeks. I was in 10th place first week in December. I still remember. And there was a week I really liked 3 games that the numbers that Jay shaded them so much. I got crap numbers on all 3, and people were playing the opposite side, playing the good numbers. I went with the games I liked into the bad numbers, swept the 3 up, put me right back into the top 3, went on to win. So there's a lot to be said for. One thing I like to do is to play games late when I'm behind that I really like into bad numbers that don't matter. So I'll take plus 7.5 on a game that's lined at 9.5. Who cares about the 8 and 9? It's not going to hit often enough for me to have to worry about it.
Another thing you want to talk about, Fez, and for, like I said, the people watching live, you'll see the infamous Pinnacle Sports logos. You wanted to talk the Pinnacle lean. And real quick before we get to your thoughts on this, I just want to tease everybody a little bit. I've been working on an article with some former high-end guys at Pinnacle that are in semi-retirement, and that have been sharing me a lot of the stuff that went into their line movements and this infamous Pinnacle lean. So I have an article coming out on that shortly, so stay tuned for that. But that was one of the things you want to talk about, Fez. So once again, floor is yours, the Pinnacle lean. What can you educate our listeners about?
I think this is supposed to be an evergreen webinar, but we'll talk about a specific game, 257, 258, Cincinnati, Atlanta. Money is pouring in on the Bungles here. Line was +3. Now it's painted 2 to 2.5 across the board. But Pinnacle has dropped this all the way to 1.5 flat in each direction. So they've got big limits in preseason. They're taking big bets right now. What Pinnacle is telling you is they think strongly that Cincinnati is the right side. We're close to posts. We are 2 hours away, and they're putting up a line that's a complete stopper. You would never bet the Bengals +1.5 when there's 2s and 2.5s everywhere. And so Pinnacle is telling you they believe that that's the right side. Got to be careful with these penny leans because when there's low limits, sometimes people just bet the wrong side to fool you. But that would be an example of what I would call a true penny lean that I would trust, that I would say you like the Bengals and you missed the +3 and you're going to let it go. Maybe here's a situation where you should go ahead and take a shot with a piece of the Bengals.
Next one, conference specialization in college football. Floor is yours.
Wow, is this going to be unpopular? I attempted to get a power rating on each and every college football team the last 2 years. I stayed up all night Saturday night going through every box score. I updated everything. I was ready for the openers, and my success was not there. And part of the reason I was so sleep deprivated and just a zombie by trying to handicap 125 college football teams. And going into the season, I am so excited, John, because I've finally done it. I've said, all right, I am doing 3 to 4 conferences, and I may well kill 1 or 2 of them early on in the year when basketball season's right around the corner. I think it's a much more effective way to say, hey, I'm going to do the Pac-10. I'm going to do the Big Ten. I'm going to do the Sun Belt. It doesn't matter. Now, you could make a case certainly for doing the smaller conferences rather than the bigger ones, but because I do so much live wagering, it's important for me to try to do the big conferences. I'll give a couple conclusions that I've drawn. Having gone through my initial Big Ten work, I don't think that Ohio State's very much better than Wisconsin, if anything. And the market thinks that they're light years better. The game of the year has Ohio State laying 10.5, hosting Wisconsin. And based upon the specialization work I've done, Wisconsin lost 5 games by 3 points last year. I don't see there being much difference at all between these two teams.
RJ's not going to like to hear that. Well, with the amount of questions I'm going to move on, and I'm not going to crack any jokes on Mr. Bell because I could probably do a whole webinar on that one. Betting derivatives, first half team totals.
Yeah, I think let's talk about a WNBA game that we were discussing. We saw the screen, Johnny and I both saw Washington, Minnesota steam from 160.5 up to 162. Looks like the sharp money, at least right now, is on the over. And both of us, our initial reaction is, hey, can we get an over 80 or an over 80.5? I see there's 180 on the screen and a couple 80.5s on the first half. And the reason I like betting that first half derivative is oftentimes that information that people are getting, it seems to really play out early in the game, especially about the pace of a game and the like. And a lot of times you can't find that over 160 anymore, or even over 161, but you can almost always, it's another click, it's another couple minutes before the books adjust the first half, because they oftentimes won't adjust it until it's been bet. And sometimes these movers that are moving for syndicates, the syndicate just sends out, hey, grab over 160, and that's what the bettors do what they're told to do, and they don't even look at the first halves, and you can oftentimes get an equivalent type bet on that first half that hasn't moved versus having to take the worst of the number if you want to get on the move and give up a point of line value.
Last one before we get to all of the questions. Preseason betting. Once again, floor is yours.
Oh my gosh, there was a discussion between Andy Iskoe, real good discussion, and Scott Spreitzer about preseason betting, and Andy was asking, Scott, well, if the goal of the coaches is not to win the game, does this make sense to bet? And I emphatically answer absolutely yes, because I think it makes it much easier to win. The best evidence that I can give of this is that look at the low limits on preseason. Look at week 17 when sometimes some NFL teams don't want to win. Look at the NBA Summer League in the preseason when they put these numbers up in Vegas, and one prominent sports book pulled them back down after putting them up for 2 days, said the heck with this. I think there's all kinds of really good opportunities. Now, having said that, you have to be careful. Just because it's beatable doesn't mean that I'm going to beat it or you're going to beat it. You have to do the right homework and get behind it. I will pass along one of my favorite preseason things is that obviously week 2 is my favorite preseason week to bet. Next week, I love to look at a team that just stunk up the joint. You watched it over and over, and you went ahead and actually saw the game. You'd say, this team can't score, especially a team that's completely inept offensively. I'm almost always going to look to bet on that team the next week, because so much of preseason's desire and motivation in order to do well. And, one thing I'll share that I always look to in preseason, if I get a stinker, I get a 3-0 or a 6-3 game where both offenses couldn't move the ball and both defenses look great. I know the Rex Ryans of the world are going to be screaming at their players all week long on offense, patting the defense on the back. Those teams usually find a way to play high-scoring games week 2 into depressed totals.
Real quick, Fez, going to what you just said about, limits and whatnot, is I just want to get your thoughts on this. Is I sometimes will have a lot of locals, if they're getting beat or whatnot, we'll ask them questions. Hey, can you look at this account? What do you think I'm doing wrong? And I say one of the things you need to do is go to a place of Pinnacle and look at their limits. And if they're not taking as much on a WNBA as the NFL or a quarter in the NFL as they do at the side, there's a reason why. This is a book that has, probably some of the biggest balls in the industry. And clearly NFL is beatable or college football is beatable. But my opinion, and I want your thoughts on this, is to know which sports are probably, I'd say, the softest, is when you could bet 50,000 on an NFL side, but 500 on a WNBA halftime. My thought process is there's more value in trying to figure out a way to beat the WNBA versus the NFL. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree strongly with that. And like a corollary, the nice thing about the NFL is that there's look-ahead lines, there's games of the year, there's so many other things that you can bet in the NFL that you don't just have to play into Wednesday's lines that have been set. You've got so much, you want to play first quarters, first halves, so there's a much more broad brush market to be playing all this stuff. But like a good example is BetOnline has had their college football numbers up forever, and but I don't know what their limits are, and if you win, who knows if you get paid. The second the bookmaker posted their numbers, all of a sudden BetOnline just copied all the sides, because those were the correct numbers, because you could bet $5,000 into those numbers. You put a limit like that, that's going to get people to the right place, and then Cal isn't getting 8 or 9 against Northwestern. Now they're getting 6 or 5 real quickly. Now the true number probably should be a little bit higher than that. But, just as an example, if anyone's on the webinar and has a BetOnline account, there's like LSU TCU game 268, that total's 43. There's no way that total's going to close 43. The under is a great bet. In fact, if you bet every one of these BetOnline totals under, you'll make money, because they're all too high for the most part. But the limits are so low, who cares? Who bothers? We'll wait till hopefully someone will copy them, then we can get some bets down.
And that's a good thing, is that a lot of these head count places will get feeds or lines. And, a BetOnline, as you just said, will have this low limit, and a credit shop might be locking their, using their lines. but they're using actual limits. And that's the thing a lot of people got to do is use the sports options. And I'm going to give a little quick 30-second plug. And I know Scotty Dogg's going to send me an email busting my balls and I'm going off topic. But, sports options to me is the owner of is one of the most stand-up people. And if you're trying to take gambling seriously, you need a live lines feed. Pregamelines.com is probably the fastest free one. But if you want to get serious, you need something like sports options. You could track the credit shops. You could track a lot of different things, see the line movements. And if you want to try sports options, you could shoot me an email at johnny@pregame.com. I'll get you a free trial. And if it's something you're interested in, I'm really close friends with Rick. I've known him since he's been running Don Best. He now owns sports options. And then I could hook you up with a better deal than what you'd get if you came in right off the street. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go back. We're going to move right into the questions and answers. And Fez, I've sat at dinner with you, and I know you even talk more than I can because you have so much knowledge in that big head of yours. So we're going to, if it's something that requires you to go a little extra, you do what you got to do. But we'll try getting through as many questions as possible. So first one right out the gate, Fezzik, your definition of stale numbers, please.
Any number that you can't get at any of the major books anymore. So if you can bet it at Jerry's Nugget or even at the Win, but you can't bet it at Bookmaker, Pinnacle, any of the major offshore shops.
All right, next question. This is a two-part question. I have a two-part question that I hope you guys can get to. I create my power ratings by grading teams' position by position. How do you create your own power ratings, and how long did it take before you could trust and believe in those numbers?
I don't know if I ever trust them completely and believe in them because they're always changing. But no, it's a good point. That's the Kenny White method, by the way, of evaluating each and every player. You got to be a little careful with that because let's say you got a team playing Air Force and they got a great secondary. Well, that's not going to help any against Air Force because all they do is run the ball, or Army or Navy. So there are situations every year where you get an academy playing a team with a really good secondary, and the academy is always the right bet there. But I actually take a consensus of all the power ratings that I get from like three guys that spend way more time on these teams than I do. And then I much more look for good situational spots where I'm going through the schedule. I'm doing that right now with the conferences I'm following, trying to find the very best spots to identify teams to play. So I'm not a huge just bet the power rating guys. Johnny, can I mention one power rating tip that seems like everyone gets wrong?
Hey, Fez, it wouldn't be Fezzik without you trying to correct what the general masses think. So go ahead.
You make your power ratings, and they're good, and you subtract the differences, and that's your point spread. You got to have a formula that has a regression towards the mean when that spread goes above about 12. In other words, if you calculate two teams being 55 apart, the true spread probably should be 44. So you can't just take the difference because you're always going to wind up saying, oh, this team's going to absolutely kill the other team, and obviously the scrubs come in the fourth quarter. That's got to be built into it. You also have to prorate by the total. If the average total in a college football game is 55 right now, if you have Oklahoma State playing, Oklahoma State's not as good a team as LSU, but Oklahoma State is going to cover more often against a team like Rice than LSU if asked to lay 30 because they're going to play a game in the high 60s instead of a game in the low 50s.
Next question. Given a $5,000 bankroll, how much would you recommend wagering per unit to withstand the ups and downs of the NFL and college football?
Yeah, a 2% of bankroll is a very good number, so I would bet 2% of bankroll, about $100. But if it's a really good play, and you certainly can step up and take a shot and bet 4% of bankroll on selected plays that you know are really good. So I would say I would probably cap it at a max bet of 5% of bankroll. I will say if you're starting with $5,000, and I know this is about sports betting, I'm a huge believer in how beatable these low-limit, 1-3 no-limit games are in Vegas and everywhere now. I really would learn how to play no-limit poker and build your bankroll playing some poker at that lower levels. I don't know of anyone that I've ever talked to, worked with, that can't beat the crap out of 1-3 no-limit poker. If they just have discipline and fold a lot and recognize, don't call raises with hands like King 10, King Jack.
Next question. Do you wager differently at the beginning of the season compared to midway through the regular season? in order to get a feel for the teams. And real quick, my thoughts on that is, if you think you are that much smarter than the odds makers, is they are also getting a feel for the teams. And those lines by the end of the season, a lot of times are going to be sharper. I've talked to odds makers, and in the beginning of the season, especially in the college sports, college basketball, college football, there's such an influx and change in teams and coaching staff and players that it's literally impossible for them to have accurate lines on especially a lot of the obscure teams in the beginning of the year. Once they get a feel for the teams, those second-tier teams or those lower-rung teams, those lines are going to be a little more accurate. So if you could do your homework, your research, and have some accurate power ratings, know the players that are coming in, changes in scheme, those early season lines a lot of times are going to be based off last year with some minor modifications. At least in my opinion, it's always easier to beat in the middle part of the beginning part of the season. And I know, for Right Angle Sports even, when I was following their totals, or even the sharp guys that I followed, they usually had a rule that they lowered what they were betting once conference play hit because it was a lot harder to win. Fezzik, your thoughts on that question?
I agree with that 100%. It's my very, very largest wagers usually are earlier in the season because no one knows how good certain teams are. Example, I played UNLV over 2.5 wins here locally. It's still 3.5. That's a good wager, but over 2.5, I bet a ton on it. And now I'm just kicking myself for not having bet even more at that 2.5 because it's going to win. Another team that people think is like a middle tier Big 12 team is Iowa State, that people say, well, every year they win 6, and I played under 5.5. I did give that out as a premium play. I know it's minus like 190 now. Iowa State's not going to win 6 games this year. It was a miracle that they won things. They got a bad schedule this year. Another example of a play. God, John, I wish I had enough other outs that I could have played Iowa State under 5.5 everywhere, laying $1.50, 60, 70. Another play we'll look back on and we'll say, what were the odds makers thinking with plays like that?
Next question. Fezzik, do you get down on the NFL look-ahead lines for the following week at all? And if so, what type of parameters are needed to be met to warrant such a play? And real quick, before we get that to Spencer's question, Spencer, shoot me another email because I'm going to be deleting this as I go because we have so many questions. On sports options, you could just call. I know Rick's on vacation, I believe, for the next day or so. Just call, ask to talk to Rick Allen, and say you were sent by Johnny Detroit or Pregame, and he'll take care of you. So, Fezzik, I'll repeat it real quick. Fezzik, do you get down on NFL look-ahead lines for the following week at all? And if so, what type of parameters are needed to be met to warrant a play?
Yeah, I set my numbers every Monday night. I check with I've got a friend in Costa Rica. I always check with him, and I've got a friend, a pro poker player, actually. He's probably the world's greatest open-faced Chinese player I've ever seen, and damn good at no-limit player also. He gives me his numbers, and with those in tow, we kind of fight about the ones we disagree with, which aren't that many, and I'll go down to the LVH. I'm always going to my Tuesday meeting, whenever possible, Tuesday at 12:30. They eat 12 to 12:30. I don't get to eat, which is good because I'm fat, and so I go to LVH, fat with an F.
Hey, real quick, Fez. I mean, I've been to Vegas. I've met a lot of the pros and gamblers. You may be fat if you're hanging around a bunch of supermodels, but you're probably average, if not a little bit slender compared to the rest of that crew. But go ahead.
Well, in the world of the one-eyed man or whatever, the no-eyed men, I'm the Cyclops. At any rate, I go to the LVH. I storm in there at like 12:02. I go, are they up yet? Are they up yet? And they'll be like, calm down. Probably about 10 minutes, and then so I wait, and then they go up there and they go, all right, wagering for next week's lines are now available, and a few other people will start looking up the board to find their plays. No. I just rush to the window and just say, read them off to me, or give me a printout, and I read them down, and then it's a matter. I think the question was, well, what constitutes a wager? I want a 54% play minimum. So that means if they got a game at plus 3.5 and I got it at 3, I'm going to take the plus 3.5 on a hook. On a more normal number, like if I make a game 6.5 and they make it 5, it's a judgment call. I'll usually kind of hem or haw at it, but those numbers aren't worth very much. I don't really want to tie up my money for a week, so I tend to pass in situations like that. I really want to calculate estimate what the value of each number is. I usually won't lay 10.5 if I make the line 12 because it's just not enough of an edge. I want to have something where I feel like I'm going to win at a minimum 54%. And I've certainly found plays I thought I would win, close to 60%.
Next question. Fezzik, can you give some more details on this $100,000 challenge we're hearing about? And my second question is, are you nervous at all that you're being challenged by Tooth Doc?
Yeah, I have to say, I got jelly in the belly. I am worried about this Tooth Doc. This Tooth Doc, it sounds to me like he's been waiting in the wings to take my money. So I'm glad he's only going to go 10,000 at the most from what I hear. Thank goodness. But everyone else in the world, I got no problems with. 6 years of data. We had the Hilton run it for us, and they came back and let me know I was at 56.8%. And so we basically said, I know I worked my butt off, I ran well, and I think that's pretty much the most that a savvy, hardworking capper could expect to hit going forward. And you hear all these claims at 71%, which are just what's laughable to me, Johnny, is everyone says, well, we have to document him and prove he doesn't have to hit 71%. And I'm like, no, if someone says they can run a 2-minute mile, I don't need to document them at the track. Thank you very much. Unless they're on their motor scooter, they can't do it. And so this was more to just show realistic expectations of what you can expect to do. It'll be fun. RJ doesn't think we're going to get a taker or that many takers. I think we might get 2 or 3. We'll see. But if you think that you can hit 56.8% or better against the LVH lines that come out on Wednesday, you can submit on Saturday. Just enter the contest, easy administration. Let's go ahead and have a fun contest.
Next question, Fezzik. I'm interested. What got you started in sports gambling?
I actually was working as an actuary in Los Angeles, and in the early 90s, I discovered parlay cards in Las Vegas where they print the cards on Tuesday, and then they wouldn't reprint them until the games started. They would never reprint them. They wouldn't pull games off. And so for about 10 years, all I was really focusing on, I would just go to Nevada and play parlay cards and playing teams, oftentimes laying 2.5 on games at 3.5, taking 14.5 on college football games that were at 11.5. And that animal has dried up for the most part. All those games get pulled off now. But for the longest time, that was my big advantage play that I did with sports betting. And then I got more and more involved with actively handicapping really in the early 2000s.
All right, next one. Fezzik, can you share any of your NFL future bets for this season? And the current line for San Francisco to win the Super Bowl at LVH? I don't know what it is at LVH, but I saw this question earlier, and I looked offshore. I'm seeing anywhere from 5 to 7 to 1 offshore. Fezzik, off the top of your head, before you get to any future bets you want to share, do you know what the LVH right now is San Francisco at?
Yeah, they're under. I don't know what they are to win it all. I was just there, and I believe, gosh, I'm getting them in the win mixed up. One of them had like under 11.5, lay $1, like 75, and the other had them down to like under 11, lay $1.65. Money is poured in against the Niners with Crabtree going down, and just the feeling of that, 11 is really the stopper in an NFL season win. When you go above 11, you got to have everything going for you, and you have to have a cream puff schedule. So the Broncos would qualify, although they've had their own problems. So I think their 11.5 is going to dip to the under. But I would discourage anyone from trying to play a future on the 49ers, even though you could make a case for them being the best team in the NFC. There's just too much uncertainty right now. I can't see that number eroding if you waited a month and made sure that they don't get out of the gate badly.
Next question. How do I convert my point spreads into a decimal to represent my win probability for a given team?
Depending upon the number what I do is, so if I make a power rating, I do my power rating situationals, I come up with a line of 2.5, and I can bet a plus 3.5. That would be an easy conversion. A team that's favored by 3 wins by 3, right around 11% of the time. So I would expect to win 61% of the time if I can go ahead and get that hook. I'm doing halves to make it easy. Let's say I make a game 5.5 and I can lay 4.5. Well, the team's only going to win by 5, like maybe 1.5% of the time. So that would only be a 51.5% play. So it's not the number of points that your number's off. It's how valuable those points actually are.
Next question. Everyone knows the infamous stat that the NFL spread does not matter in around 82% of the games. Given that 3-point dogs win straight up over 90% of the time when they cover, and 6-point dogs win around 50% of the time when they cover, Should bettors blindly bet money lines instead of spreads for underdogs of 7 or less, or look at each game individually? What would you
No,
recommend?
no, and this is like what happened is that it used to be that a 2-point favorite would be like minus 145, take back plus 125. And back then it was the right play. But what happened is that enough people noticed that, and then all the books and the literature said, well, if you can't get 3, just take the money line. But now you get robbed blind on the money line. So now it's a situation where the line is at 2 and you can get plus at 105. And who wants plus 105 when I can actually get 2 points, or better yet, tease it up to plus 8? So that used to be true. Now I would strongly disagree with it. One thing I also want to definitely mention is that we talk about derivative betting, first half betting. This is more true for basketball also. I've noticed that the money line oftentimes in basketball is way cheap. Like if you have a 1-point favorite in the second half, you might be able to get a money line minus 125, and minus 125 is so much better than minus 1, lay $1.10 for a second half money line. So I actually find there's more bargains out there to play the money line on the favorite than whereas even 5-10 years ago, it was the opposite.
Next one. How do you suggest bettors prep for college football? Are there publications that give a great overview on all the team position, battles, returning seniors, etc.? I used to use Blue Ribbon Yearbook for football, but they've discontinued. I bought Phil Steele, but I don't think it's as good.
Yeah, again, it's not the way that I handicap, but I'll use the Brian Leonard method, which I think is excellent. He takes the Phil Steele book on all his teams, and he writes all the starters for each and every team that are the returning starters, and I'm sorry, the projected starters. And then he looks at the actual lineups that these teams field, and he starts Xing out guys. And here's guys that either have underperformed during the fall practices and lost their jobs or got injured, and that's more a true representation for how many returning starters these teams actually have. Now, as far as coming in and determining the value of each and every player, yes, Kenny Whites of the world do that, but it's not something that I have time to do, although I really think if you just followed, say, one conference, it would be an excellent way to evaluate how much a team really has lost. My problem is I have no idea how good their backups are, so it'd be very difficult for me to assess how valuable an injury was. We go back to the old Barry Sanders backed up, an excellent running back at Oklahoma State. So can you imagine playing against Oklahoma State based on the news their starting running back was out?
And real quick, is to me, I look at it this way. I mean, I look at a lot of the magazines, so nothing against any of those print publications. I buy them, I love. I get that rush when I'm going through the pages. But, I play in a $1,000 fantasy league, and we do our draft, and I see the guys bringing in their books. I salivate because I know they're reading information that is no way as update as what I could pull off a computer or my iPad. My advice is this, especially if you're going to specialize in a conference, is, take your bookmarks and put MAC, SEC, whatever it is, and bookmark all the fan sites, the Twitter from the media or the people that are following the team, and go to things like Rival or Scouts and go to those individual forums, because the stuff on what's going on in practice, the offensive linemen, those backup players, those magazines are covering the whole entire universe of college football from a very high level for basic information that a lot of people have access to. If you follow the beat writers on Twitter or you bookmark a lot of the local newspaper sites or whatever it may be for that area, you're going to get a lot of tidbits that aren't national newsworthy that could help you get that small edge. So moving on to the next question. Hi, Steve. I really enjoyed listening to your lifetime sports winner sports betting boot camp, and see when we get to you, Fez, if you want to go a little bit into that, feel free. A few questions following my first listen to it. First one, a lot of talk includes power ratings. How would you advise someone to begin creating a side or total power rating for NFL or college football?
I'd start with somebody else's and then start tweaking it based upon, because rather than start from scratch, I would start with someone else's and then you can disagree. Like I disagree with Phil Steele's Ohio State assessment. He's got them much higher than I have them. But you need a starting point, and so that's what I use. And I'll go ahead and give out a secret if I can. Johnny, am I giving out too many secrets?
Hey, do what you got to do. It makes these people listen. If it was all generic bullshit, why would they spend their hour?
Phil Steele has page 33. He shows numerical numbers for all his teams. A lot of people use that for the starting power ratings, but he clearly labels. He said, this is just one set of 7 of my power ratings. If you want to use Phil Steele numbers, turn the page and go to the page 35. he ranks the teams in order. That's a much better representation of how strong he truly feels that these teams are.
Thank you, Mr. Fezzik. Same question, or moving on to the same topic is, outside of public sources, is there anybody you'd recommend to use for power ratings that you could find on the web or with little research? So I know, like you just mentioned earlier, Fez, you said you had some private sources that share. I know my guys, Frank and Chris, when I was in Vegas during football, they carry this little notebook around with all their data. So if you had someone who's trying to learn power ratings and get, like you said, get that starting point, what are some respectable power ratings, at least respectable in terms of anybody could find and use them online or out there that you'd recommend?
Well, pregame.com has this guy Fezzik who provides his NFL power ratings. I'd go there. In college football, I think a good source right now, you could go over to, got some friends over at sportsmemo.com. I know they're a competitor, Johnny. Just bleep me out if I screw up here.
You know what? With the internet, people can find anything with 2 seconds on Google. So that's one of the things me and RJ is we don't want to insult the intelligence of people. We know that there's there's covers, there's Vegas experts. I mean, Right Angle Sports. I mean, for me not to act like this shit exists, it's insulting the intelligence of the people listening. So just go ahead.
Well, and they've got a guy there that I think writes for them, but isn't a handicapper. Stat Intelligence, I believe, is what. Have you seen his stuff?
No.
And but over at Sports Memo right now, in one of the recent posts, he talked about, hey, based upon where the spreads are right now, I backed into what power ratings I came up with, and so that's a good tool to utilize. And what you can do is then you'll notice if you take the difference between those two numbers, you're going to come up with what the spreads are week one. So obviously you can adjust them as the spreads move and injury reports come in, but that would be an excellent starting point. And I will add, I am a huge follower of guys on Twitter. I talk to Crackman at times. I talk to a lot of sharps here locally in Vegas. I mean, I'm trying to listen to everyone. I might completely disagree with someone on one topic and then find gems on other topics, and I'll be wrong on certain topics. You just can't be right on everything. So the more you can try to find, the sharp guys and what they're thinking, I have to tell you, anything Nover says in the NFL, I'm always raise my ears up to be sure to listen to him on, because he's a guy that really follows the player by player position stuff that I don't pay as much attention to.
And I love Nover's NFL because you'll see him take favorites, and people always think, square is favorites. You got to always find the value in the dog. Nover handicaps, and if he doesn't give a shit if it's a favorite, if he thinks that's the right side, that's the right side. And to me, I think it's like 16 of the last 17 years he's had a profitable NFL season. And to go back what you just said is something I want to bring up. I clearly monitor all the forums. I like to get a feel for what's going on in the industry. And one of the things that just makes me shake my head is I see a lot of the haters, and I'll see people say, well, Fezzik, he follows some people for this sport or does this. It's not his own. He doesn't put all the time in for this sport. Nobody wins at everything on their own. Everybody trades information or uses its own. Anyone who bets college basketball totals and maybe doesn't factor in Right Angle Sports is an idiot. Anybody who has access to Steven Nover and at least doesn't respect some things or maybe use that to filter out your plays is an idiot. So for when these people say that, other people are using other people's information or this came from something else, if somebody is winning and your goal is to win, to not use the information, to me means you're a moron. So I just wanted to get that out.
A couple of my inner circle friends have heavily criticized me because I get the NFL package, and every Sunday night, it's locked up during the Sunday night game, but whenever it starts at like 10 o'clock at night, you can watch the games for the day. And I stay up half the night rewatching on the NFL Rewind, and it takes me like 40 minutes per game to shoot through. I go through as many as I can, and usually what I do, Johnny, is I go through the ones on teams I want to bet to confirm I'm not missing something. And I've actually had friends criticize me in the industry here saying, what a colossal usage of time there, do you really have to do that? So it's kind of funny, you can get it from both ends.
Right, it's and to be honest, that is truly how that shit is. All right, so next question. It seems that live betting is an area where there is still a lot of advantage to be found. Can you provide some substantial live betting trends and tips or anything you're willing to share with us novice gamblers?
Sure. I think live betting is one of the best ways, and the best example I can give is, let's just look at the screen here. If Seattle's playing at San Diego. And if you like Seattle, you can still get a -2.5 if you can get in your helicopter and fly to the LVH. And you might have a 25% chance to get that bet down before they move. Otherwise, you're laying 3 or taking 3, and then you may well get it at reduced vig. However, as soon as that game starts and there's live wagering, which wouldn't be the case on a preseason game usually, now all of a sudden it wouldn't be unusual for you to see 3s and 3.5s or 2.5s and 3s, and even, arbitrage. You could bet both sides and make a profit. If you have enough outs, the vig there basically goes to 0 because the numbers are so much different. Example, Miami was playing Dallas, and on the first drive, Dallas stalled and they punted, and Miami started on their own 7-yard line. And you might recall in that game that the spread pretty much had settled in at 3. So Miami's on their own 7, and Dallas is down 1 on their first possession. So everyone went ahead and said, well, nothing's really happened. They kept the line 3. But there was one prominent book put that line at 3.5, and which was ludicrous because Dallas had won the field position battle. That was actually a favorable first drive for them to stick Miami on the 7-yard line. It's a low total, so it's not like it's advantageous for whoever gets the ball in the second half. But they had moved that line all the way from 3 to 3.5, and so I only like talking about bets that I win. Never like talking about bets that I lose. But there's an example of that happens all the time in live wagering, that you get really good situations and good numbers you can play on.
Real quick, Fez, is it true? RJ mentioned this when I was in Vegas, and I don't know if you used this on one of your Fezzik focus things. Is it true that you flew or drove to Reno because you heard they had a bad number on one of the games?
I actually go to Tahoe once every summer. And so I always find they've got some funky numbers up in northern Nevada. So I had to go there to cash some other tickets. Now, I could have just mailed them in. That's true. But I chose to go ahead and fly up there for a day and get down on some really good numbers up there. And that's, there was a time when I would go to Wendover, which was in the other part of the state. So I'd fly into Salt Lake City, and I would go ahead and move on over. I'd drive on over the Salt Flats, 90 miles, to Wendover and play against their numbers, but they don't have an independent book anymore. And that's another story in itself. One day when I write a book, I'll write about that, the escapades I had up there one year.
Everyone will be waiting for that one. Next question. I heard you say on the Focus that you bet the props of Sunday and Monday night games. Do you handicap them all by yourself, or do you factor any fantasy expert projections to assist you?
Boy, that's one where I really should get the fantasy expert projections to assist me, and I don't. I have not relied enough on getting an expert to help me out with that stuff, and that's certainly something I'm looking forward to do. I will say that the one thing that they seem to mess up the most is that when you get a crap team getting like 10 or 12 points, all of a sudden, Jacksonville's quarterback is probably going to be able to throw for 200 yards instead of for 140. Whereas if Jacksonville, by some miracle, is laying 2 against a team like the Raiders, there would be a case where, in the rare case that Jacksonville would be favored, that the quarterback's number production is probably going to be very lousy.
All right, next one. And this is from Perks, one of my favorite at the forums. He says, let's loosen it up a little. We're talking too much math. My brain's starting to hurt. Let's candidly talk about this Tuesday meeting. What's it about? Fezzik, go ahead. Tuesday meeting.
Yeah, miscellaneous sharps. Very sharp low betting guys, very sharp high betting guys, specialist team totals guys, and we all meet on Tuesday. We go around. The one thing that drives me crazy in the format is I'm always like, can't we just all get up and spend 10 minutes talking about our best bets for the week and be done? Because we go game by game, and so what happens is so often people are like, they want to talk about one game and put their 2 cents in, but they don't really have an opinion. They think the line's roughly right. But I'm gonna fix that this year, Johnny. I've got something in the works that I'm gonna get everybody's best bets nicely summarized in that meeting. And the most valuable thing in that meeting is get off of a side you like that you got the wrong side, where you might discuss something, and then Mr. Nover comes up and he says, you are aware that both the center and the left tackle are questionable for this game, right?
How many people are usually at a Tuesday meeting? And I guess the other question from me is, how do you get an invite to it?
You don't get invited. It's like the A team. You got to know someone who knows someone. So we got about 14 people that attend, and includes Brian Leonard and Marco is often there. Vegas Runner makes makes his appearances. So we got some really good pregame guys. We got some really good non-pregame guys. We're not affiliated by any conference. We're just keeping score one way, trying to find ways to win.
So on the Tuesday, I'm sure the local buffets probably have to like increase the amount of food they have. You just mentioned Brian, you mentioned Marco. So the average over-under, I have at least 225. So next, we're going to go to Paul. He has a good question. Fezzik, do you increase or decrease your wagers as the year goes on based on how much of an edge you feel you have on what is going on in either pro or college football?
Yeah, I try to just base it upon how much of an edge that I feel that I have and not really get too concerned about results. But I would be amiss to say when I'm confident and I'm kicking butt, I bet more. And when I was rolling along in 08 and 09 and hitting 65% in the Hiltons, that made it a lot easier to be, chucking in huge bets and feeling super, super confident. Then like last night, I had a night where I had the Phoenix Mercury against Seattle. I laid 9 and my team lost by 18. And those are the sort of bets that make you like less than confident about all your handicapping in that sport. So I sometimes will take a step back and cut my bet size down after a game like that.
For us who are not in Vegas and use offshore accounts, when should we withdraw winnings from these accounts, and how much should we leave in? I'm going to make this twofold. One, I'm going to go first on this one because I'm really familiar with the offshores. Back in the day, everyone left everything in the offshores, 6 figures, whatever it is. My general test that I recommend anyone who ever comes to me with a similar question is to withdraw as often as possible for 2 things. 1, to see how easy it is, and 2, to see how quick you get your money, and 3, to make sure that check clears. The last thing you want to do is have this astronomically large balance and you never get your money. So my advice is if you a bigger better, find a couple really solid offshores, go to places like Sportsbook Review, go on Pregame and get people's feedback. Instead of having it all in one and running the risk, Enron went under, Detroit's bankrupt. Even legitimate places run into trouble. I would spread it around with some reputable places. Don't keep too much in any one place. And constantly when you hit a score, don't be lazy. Get your ass off the couch. And even though, he ended up having kind of a bad rep offshore because he had some issues, is Lenny from Cascade, when I first met him, when Cascade was known to have the sharpest lines in any offshore in baseball, I remember he told me, if someone owes you money, there's nothing you do when they say they have it to not go get it. Because the second you don't get it when it's available, every second you wait, there could be a chance it's not going to be there. So I would get in the habit of always withdrawing to do that little test that I just told you. And that's my advice on that. Fezzik, what's your thoughts on using offshores, and how often should you withdraw winnings, and how much do you feel comfortable leaving in those accounts?
Yeah, I'm not going to address the should you use offshores. That's an individual decision. It is ironic that you said about that Lenny to grab the money as fast as possible. I agreed with everything you said, Johnny. If you know Lenny well, you might ask if he ever plans to pay me back the money he owes me. That would be nice. And a fourth reason to go ahead and pull out as much money as possible. Inevitably, when you lose the 2 or 3 games in a row and your balance goes to 0, then easy phone call into the marketing person, say, hey, I'll re-up it, but I'm looking for the same bonus I got.
Exactly.
More often than not, they'll give it to you. That's a huge factor.
Great point, Fezzik. That's why I'm glad we're twofold in some of these questions. Next one.
And if you get a free play, John, this is real important. Guys, if you get a free play, don't blow it on a straight bet where it's worth 50 cents on the dollar. Play a 3-team parlay that pays 6 to 1, because now you're basically engineered a 75 cent on the dollar if you're just blindly flipping coins.
See? That alone was worth listening to me and him babble for an hour. Next question. Fezzik, I'm going to Vegas next week, and I'm staying on the Strip, looking to get down around $300 a game, but don't have a car. What book has the softest lines on the Strip within walking distance? I've heard you mention Harrah's a couple times.
Sure. I would two options. Stay downtown. You can do the walk from the coast to the right across the street, Tony Miller's Golden Nugget. You can go down to the station at El Cortez. You might want to walk rather fast the last block there. And if you want to stay on the Strip, however, yes, you can do the walk from the Wynn on the south end the north end of the Strip, Treasure Island's pretty much right across the street down a little bit, and then the north end, Harrah's. So you can hit the Mirage, you can hit Caesars, and Harrah's has very, very, very soft lines. They would be the softest of them all. So my central point might be go ahead and start at Harrah's, and then you can walk across the street to the Mirage and to Caesars. I'm sorry, Caesars would be the same as Harrah's, but you could you could take the tram from the Mirage up to Treasure Island, walk over to the Wind. You got Cantor over at the Venetian. You got 5 independent books within 20 minutes of each other walking.
Next question. The one team that to me seems likely to be overrated is Miami. The offensive line blocks well the offensive line blocks well for the running game, but they struggle to contain edge rushers and lost long. Often injured, but still solid tackles. It seems to me like people are assuming Miami will be better and Tannehill will take the next step, even though he was only a 1-year starter in college, and this bet is becoming more appealing with New England's problems.
Yeah, it's not just New England. I think he's right that I like Miami over, mostly because I don't like New England. It's not, but I don't like the Jets and I don't like Buffalo. And so now we got 6 games, second year for Tannehill. He did play wide receiver at A&M, so he understands offenses well. He's got a really hot wife. I'm not going to hold that against him. And they bring in the wide receiver from Pittsburgh, so they got the deep threats. And there's a lot to like about the Dolphins being slightly better, and everyone else in the division is way worse. But I agree that in games out of division, I don't think you want to play Miami under. By the way, the best number on that is under 8, lay $1.10. You can actually find that now in a couple of local places, including stations. But I think selectively fading Miami in non-division games makes sense.
Next one. I specialize in the NFL only, and I'm primarily a underdog contrarian bettor. I've noticed over the last few years the books have been posting numbers trying to beat the sharps as opposed to the public. For example, this year Atlanta was 10-3, I believe, and Carolina was 4-9. Yet Atlanta was only -2.5 or -3. That line was accurate according to my power ratings, but 10 years ago Atlanta would have been -5.
Yeah, I agree with that. Looking on last year when Carolina went to Atlanta, they were getting 7.5. That's the game that Cam Newton fumbled the ball on 3rd down at midfield when he should have picked up the 1st down because he held it like a loaf of bread. And then the idiot coach punted on 4th and half a yard, and they hit the 57-yard bomb to Rowdy Rodney Piper, and then they kicked the field goal to win. But like this year, Carolina is actually laying 1 at home against Atlanta. So they're the favorite in that game. And I think it isn't a matter of the book. The books don't care about sharps and squares. You give them way too much credit, guys. All they want to do is balance. They don't care who's betting what. I think people would be shocked at how completely inept all of these sports books are as far as setting lines. All they're doing is copying the lines. That's all that's happening out there. And there's really almost no thought that goes into at 80% of the sports books.
Next one, and this one's for me, so I feel kind of cool. This question's for Johnny in Detroit. I live in Atlanta. What's the easiest way to find a local? Hang out around the sports bars. Sports bars would be second. My first one would be strip clubs. A lot of my friends, and I could tell the story because they've been busted since, is I used to always tell the strippers that they are the best hustlers on the planet. Yes, they may not be the brightest or have a soul, but drug dealers, bookies, poker players, anybody who hustles and at any given point is either broke or sick with money, goes to a strip club and pisses it away. I don't know any of my bookie friends that don't hang out at a strip club and spend tons of money. So strip club first, get to know the guys working the door, the valets, sports bars second. That's my advice.
And regarding that too, instead of you having to find them, they can help you find you. What you can do is call Gambler's Bookstore. Do this now. This is like so important. Order a football rotation. It's $2. You need one anyways, okay? Order a couple of them. Walk around with that football rotation schedule everywhere you go. And when you go into a sports book, don't say, I'm looking for a bookie. Say, who do you like? And just walk around. And I would be surprised if you didn't find someone who knows someone at any sports book on any Saturday or Sunday.
Exactly. I feel we got tons of questions. We only have a couple minutes left. I'm not going to be able to get to them. So the first thing I want to do, and I hopefully, damn it, I typed this wrong. They actually should say Fez 25. Fez 25. That's FEZZ25. It takes 25% off any one purchase at pregame. That's going to be good towards the NFL and those combo packages. And it expires in the next 24 hours. Fez 25.
Can they buy Nover with that?
What?
They can buy Steven Nover with that, right?
Yes, they can buy Nover. The only thing it's not eligible for is going to be the Bet Like a Pro. We're going to go over that real quick. Since we started, and it's been like a Bet Like a Pro. He's been hot. He's been cold. Good patches, rough patches. Since the inception of the program, he's up over 25 units. The bets are rated 1, 2, and 3. It's $1,000 a month for full month of access, so it's not for everybody. Minimum of 5 units of profit guaranteed. If you don't reach that goal, you can continue for free. If you don't win it back by the second month, you can get a cash refund. We have a couple guys up tons of units. We actually had one gentleman who picked in the time that Fez hit his rough patch, and he got his refund. And it's no bullshit. And the best part is you're eligible for the pregame rewards program, so you can use that $1,000, and you can get the reward points. You get the plays via text messages, email, and if you choose IM, or all 3. So if you're interested in that, you could go to the forums and read about it. You could email me at johnny@pregame.com. It's not something that you are allowed to just buy. You have to talk to me one-on-one over the phone to make sure that 1, you have enough outs, 2, enough bankroll, and 3, you understand that this is a grind. And a story that I tell everybody who I talk to is to understand guys like Fezzik and Brian Leonard. I did a favor for Brian Leonard, and he emailed me thanking me for what I did. And usually when someone out of state, because I deal with a lot of people all over the country, the famous line is always, when you're in town, dinner's on me. Next time you're in town, we're going to take you out drinking on me. Brian, no shit, goes to me. Not kidding, this was serious. This is the grind. JD, I really appreciate what you did for me. Next time you're in Vegas, we go to dinner, appetizers on me. That's the guys who are the Bet Like a Pro guys. So, Fezzik, I want you to end with anything you want to add for Bet Like a Pro, the upcoming football season. And once Fezzik's done talking, that's going to do it. So I want to say my thanks to everyone who participated. As always, best of luck. Fezzik, close it out, and when you're done, end it up, and I'll end the webinar.
It sounds like my cat igloo is ready to wrap it up too. On Bet Like a Pro, I know we've been saying like a $200, $250 minimum bet. I'd really say your min bet should be $500 to go ahead and qualify. Hey, we're going to be out there for the LVH seminar August 23rd, 24th. I got plans on Saturday night, but Friday night I can stay as late as necessary. If anyone has any questions or they just want to talk football, definitely track me down, and I'll be very available then. Looking forward to meeting anyone who comes out for that seminar. It should be a great time. It's my kind of price, free. And John, you're going to be out there for that, of course.
Yes, I am. I'm actually bringing my lovely wife out there, and right now, as of now, we have plans Thursday. I'm actually going to club hop with a Vegas runner and Kelly in Vegas. So I'm kind of excited about that.
Hey, you be careful out there, okay?
Yeah. That was low. All right. I appreciate Fezzik taking the time out of his busy schedule. I appreciate everyone who skipped dinner. You're going to have a lot of pissed off old ladies at prime time off of work. You say and listen to 2 dudes talking football. That's going to do it. I'm Johnny Detroit. He's Fezzik. If you're interested in Bet Like a Pro, contact me. Don't forget that coupon. That's going to do it. And as always, from me to you, best of luck.